One of the biggest mistakes photographers make is to shoot a job with no film in the camera because they got no results. And you find out later, no film in the camera. So you've got to be very, very careful. And another mistake is that I learnt the hard way when I worked in London for the Express, is you never tell the picture editor you've got pictures until you actually see them. And an example was the English goalkeeper in those days, a guy called Peter Bonetti, had injured his thumb during a match, and there was a big match coming up to play for England, but he was going to be out of business because he was in hospital with his arm the thumb in a plaster cast, and every photographer in Fleet Street was outside this hospital trying to get a picture of Peter, in the ward, but of course you couldn't get up there, they wouldn't let you. And after about a week, there was only a few photographers, and after 2 weeks, there was only one photographer, and it happened to be me. And the matron at the hospital, she got to know me. She saw me every day, standing outside this hospital in the freezing cold, wrapped up in an overcoat, gloves, and a beret, cap, everything to keep you warm. And she said, "Son, what do you actually want?" I said, "Matron, I just want to come up into the ward. I'll be up there for 1 second. I'll get one photo of Peter and his arm in a sling with a nurse attending to him, and I'll be gone and you'll never see me again." She said, "Come with me." She takes me up to the ward, and I had a Mimeoflex camera. And in those days there was 2 settings on the camera, one for flash and one for globes, flash globes. Anyway, I get Peter, and she said, the matron said, "Be quick, he's just had a needle. You'll be asleep soon." So I go flash, take the photo with a nurse, with Peter and his arm in a plaster, and away I go. Back to my car. I used to drive a Mini in those days, and that's where I made my big mistake. I told the office I was on the way back, and I had the full back page, sports page, of Peter Bonetti in hospital with his arm in a plaster. I get back to the darkroom, and when I'd taken the photo, I had noticed there was a funny sound coming from the camera. Sure enough, I developed the film. The films are all blank. I look at my camera, and it was on the globe setting instead of the flash setting. The phone rings. It's the sports editor downstairs saying, "Where's that Aussie photographer with the front page? Is he back yet?" And I go, "Shh," to the dark room. I get back in my Mini. I broke all records getting back to the hospital, which was only at Earl's Court, wasn't far from the office. I broke every record getting back there. I rush up to the ward, and thank God the same matron was there, and she said, "What are you doing back here, son?" I said, "Matron, forget Peter Bonetti's life, do you want to save mine?" She said, What's wrong?" I said, "I mucked up. I had the camera in the wrong setting." She said, "Oh, I think Peter's asleep now." I said, "Can we check?" So we go to the bed, and he's still awake, thank God. I have the camera this time on the right setting. I do the photo with the same thing, the nurse, arm in plaster. Get back in my Mini, back to the office, develop the film, rush it down to the sports editor. And he said, "God, you Aussie photographers are so slow." That's when I learnt my lesson. You never, ever tell anyone you've got a photo until you see it with your own eyes. It's almost as bad as having no film at all in the camera. A couple of other lessons you learn. One, I learnt that when I first came to Fleet Street, I learnt that, and I thought I was a hotshot, and it was the days of the Profumo case. That was the Christine Keeler scandal, and I was sent down to Parliament House to get a photograph of the Prime Minister, a guy called Harold Macmillan. He was the English Prime Minister in those days, and he's going to come out of a door at Parliament House and get into a car, and all the photographers are behind barriers. And I was sent there with the chief photographer of the Express his name was Terry Fincher, and he was one of the greatest photographers, not only in the Express, in the world. Anyway, I get a photo of Harold Macmillan coming out of this door and get into the car. I got one photo, and I thought I'd done well. just to get a photo. And I'm feeling pretty proud of myself until I get back to the darkroom. And I see Terry Fincher printing his 5th photo of Harold Macmillan. 5th photo! And I said, Terry, how did you get 5 photos? He said, oh, I had all these cameras strapped to his body. He had about 3 cameras strapped to his body, and they were all hooked up to his main camera. So when he took a photo with his main camera, they all took photos. That's why he's printing his 5th camera. That's when I learned that I knew nothing about photography. And I used to follow Terry Fincher around like a little cattle dog from then on to try and learn the secrets of photography. Another lesson learnt.